Dick Thornett, and then number 1, the South Sydney fullback, Eric Sims. John Rhodes, number 2. Let's go down the line, pick up some more of them. Fred Jones, number 12. Wittenberg, number 13. Number 4, Graham Langlands. Here's the New Zealand side, led by their 5'8", Jim Bond, shaking hands with Johnny Raper as the rest of the side lines up. And no changes to the Australian side compared to last week's team, which played Great Britain, apart from the dropping of Arthur Beetson, replaced by Elton Rasmussen. New Zealand had some bad luck during the week, losing their big forward, Oscar Danielson. He's been replaced by Henry Tatana. Referee now, Mr. Percival, on the field. Both from Queensland. And the sides now preparing to take up their positions. In the first half, New Zealand will defend the Milton Courts end, that's left of screen, and Australia, of course, running from literally the northern end. The near side wingers for Australia will be Johnny King. Other winger for Australia is John Rhodes from the Canterbury Bankstown Club, defending the far side of the field. This particular camera position right on the halfway line to give you a good indication of the sides lining up. And the near side winger for New Zealand is Ernie Wiggs, who also is their goal kicker. Stand by, everybody. Traditional roar goes up from the crowd. We're ready for this do-or-die effort by New Zealand. They must win today to make sure of getting into the World Cup final. If they lose, you can forget about any hope they have. To kick off for New Zealand, the skipper Jim Bond, number 6, the 5'8". New Zealand running left to right in this first half in the white shorts. But in fact, the fullback Elwood comes through a fairly long one, goes towards the far wing, and let's see what Australia's forwards can do. Dick Thornett with the ball, number 9. Well held up. Wittenberg as the dummy half for Australia. And immediately, New Zealand's backs are caught offside. A penalty to Australia awarded 35 yards out from their own line. With the ball, Eric Sims from South Sydney, who kicked so well against Great Britain last week, looking for the line on the grandstand side, raises the flags about 10 yards inside the New Zealand half. The tap to come up there and to take it with the ball at the moment is Rhodes, throwing it over to halfback Billy Smith, number 7. Just watch the action now. Smith gets it away well. Back to Smith, in fact, as he doubled up very, very well and looked for his forwards coming through, but Smith still with the ball for Australia. A long one across to Dick Thornett, number 9. New Zealand forwards are standing up very well, and this is where the New Zealand strength lies today, in their forwards. In the meantime, one of the New Zealand players injured. Play held up temporarily. That's the player on top of the screen at the moment, and the first aid man as yet not on the field. Referee has called for him to come on, and this is their captain and 5'8", Jim Bond, down injured. Apparently he must have run into one of the Australian players in that quick passing movement across to Billy Smith. First aid man on the field, and play to resume as soon as Jim Bond gets back onto his feet. Apparently Bond has received a bit of a knock in the face. Wouldn't be at all surprised if he had a split lip. But he's a very tough fellow, Jim Bond. He's a building contractor from Canterbury, 28 years of age, and pretty small for a 5'8", only 11 stone 11. Quite okay now, goes back to his position, and Australia to continue. With the ball at the moment, Dick Thornett, number 9, second row forward from the Parramatta Club, as it goes to Billy Smith. Tony Branson. The long one across here towards the centres, where Graham Langlands caught in position. Very, very slow to move on that occasion. Jones across to Raper. Smith. Well put down underneath that time by the New Zealand halfback, Gary Clark. Eric Sims with a clearing kick and knocked over for his troubles. It goes back to the New Zealand fullback Elwood, takes it right on his own line. Will have to run this one out himself. Very few New Zealand players up there to support him. He's beautifully tackled by Branson, 10 yards out. A kick wouldn't go astray for New Zealand here. They're press it on their own line, and they do have the wind behind them. Gary Smith was tackled on that occasion, but the penalty goes to New Zealand. Offside play once more by Australia. Good opportunity now for New Zealand to gain some distance with this penalty kick. Oh, a bad kick. It screwed off the side of the boot. Flag raised just outside the New Zealand 25. Played away well that time by Colin O'Neill. Let's see what the New Zealand's players can do in attack. In for the tackles with Thornett and Sims. New Zealand not over impressive so far. Fairly good run by Kevin Dixon. At least they're throwing it about as Bond gets a pass away this time, and a good tackle that time of Bond as he attempts to go through, and the tackler underneath was Ron Coote from South Sydney. Well, here comes the kick, and probably we'll see a lot of this in the first half. Back to Eric Sims, the Australian fullback, just outside his own 25. Not too much support up there, and he had to take the dump himself. Johnny Raper will be the dummy half. Oh, bad pass. Must have gone ahead of Graham Langland's. Langland's still trying to go through and smash down for his troubles over the top that time. Billy Smith juggling the ball loose. Kicked through, regained by Ron Coote for Australia. And Coote over the halfway line into New Zealand territory. He'll play it to Fred Jones, number 12, the Australian hooker, to Smith, number 7. Elwood, and Elwood put down on the far side. Play still in New Zealand territory. Good tackle that time by Johnny Greaves for Australia. Another kick by New Zealand. Quite obviously, these will be the tactics they'll adopt in the first half. It's completely beaten. Johnny King rolled into touch just outside the Australian 25, and a scrum to pack down there, 10 yards out. Billy Smith for Australia on the far side of the scrum, puts it in. It's an Australian ball, goes past Branson, out to Langland, who tries to go back inside. Bond hit him high, and then Raper regained the ball, and Bond hit him, but the penalty goes to New Zealand. This is not beyond their top-line goal kicker, Ernie Wiggs, and we'll see in a moment. Wiggs has come in from the wing, so Wiggs will have a shot at goal from something like 27 yards out from the Australian line, and about 2 or 3 yards to the right-hand side of the post. Ernie Wiggs, number 5, ready to try and put 2 points on the board with a penalty kick from just outside the Australian 25. And the flags are up, and New Zealand hit the lead after something like 5 minutes play in the first half. New Zealand 2 with a penalty goal by Ernie Wiggs, Australia 0. Billy Smith has placed the ball on the halfway line, the line in centre screen at the moment. A deep one that almost beat the New Zealand winger Mincham, now running with the ball. Comes high there and hard into Elton Rasmussen and bundled into touch. The scrum now to pack down about 30 yards out from the New Zealand line. Ball thrown to Gary Clark, the New Zealand half-back, bounced straight out, and there's a penalty immediately there against the Australian hooker Fred Jones for feet out in the scrum to New Zealand. And a good opportunity for New Zealand to gain some more distance with a kick from just outside their own 25. Johnny King watches it very, very carefully for Australia. Almost took the camera on the Australian 25. And the tap now to be taken by New Zealand in a very, very strong attacking position. Unfortunately, a knock-on by Gary Clark, the New Zealand halfback, and the scrum now to pack down midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Smith ready to feed this scrum for Australia. It's a New Zealand ball, bounced straight out to Clark, but the referee did not let that one go. Smith tries again for Australia, and the penalty this time goes against the New Zealand hooker Colin O'Neill for feet out in the scrum. A wrong foot out in the scrum, and an ideal opportunity for Eric Sims with the ball to gain some distance. On the terrace side, he's raised the flag pretty well midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. Johnny King probably will come in. No, he's thrown it across there to Jones, who'll take the tap to Raper. Branson, Raper dubbied up for the dummy, but it went back to Rasmussen, who's straight up to the New Zealand 25 and well put down. Plays it to Jones, number 12. Smith, Branson, Langlands, up over the New Zealand 25 and chasing him hard. He almost burst clear, but finally stopped there in his tracks by Kevin Dixon, the New Zealand second rower, playing it to Raper. Branson, Smith, Dick Thornett, Coote, but Coote couldn't quite handle it. Picked up by Sims. Sims is 20 yards out from the New Zealand line. The cover defence comes at him. He looks for support, gets it back to Dick Thornett, but the referee already is right up on the spot, and everybody was covered playing the ball. It'll go back to Smith, to Branson, Short kick ahead, racing forward over there will be Rhodes. Also going forward is Wiggs. Wiggs gets to it first. He's grounded there. Falls on the ball behind his own line, and a line dropout now coming up for New Zealand. Meantime, one of the New Zealand players still down on the ground. We thought for a moment it could be Bond. Of their forwards apparently a little bit knocked about from the last skirmish. The first aid man to come back onto the field, and apparently the right knee giving that player some trouble, and play to recommence with a line dropout for New Zealand. It is Bond once more, and Bond has been in the wars since this match started. He received a facial injury in the first 2 or 3 minutes. Apparently now has sustained a knee injury. This will be bad luck for New Zealand. They have 2 very fine replacements, of course. Roger Tate, who prefers to play in the centre, as our score after something like 10 minutes play in the first half. Not quite 10 minutes. New Zealand 2, Australia 0, and Bond number 6 wants to stay on the field. The first aid man has obviously told him he should leave, but he's determined to stay on the field. New Zealand referee Percival on right of screen speaking to him, and Bond obviously in a bit of pain there with that knee. Play continues. A line dropout for New Zealand taken by Elwood. A pretty good one too. Picked up beautifully though by Billy Smith for Australia. Looks towards the New Zealand 25. No support up there at all. Well put down by Gary Smith, the New Zealand prop forward. Raper. It's at well to Branson. Branson up over the New Zealand 25, and once more, that must have been a forward pass ruling against Australia. And now New Zealand have the penalty just outside their own 25. And once more, Jim Bond, you can just see him there in the top left-hand corner, number 6, limping towards the sideline. So don't be at all surprised if Roger Tate, the replacement back, comes on. Jim Bond leaving the field for New Zealand, limping very badly on that left leg. Temporarily, New Zealand 1 man down as Elwood takes the penalty kick. And Australia handling badly. Smith couldn't quite handle it. One went behind him. No knock on. He continues, and well put down over the top by Tony Krilitich, the New Zealand lock forward. Thornett to Raper. Back inside to Thornett, number 9 for Australia. Using his weight, but once more the New Zealand forwards working as a unit up there. And here again the penalty goes to Australia, and that was against the New Zealand forwards coming through and not allowing Thornett to play that ball. 3-1 after the referee Percival had asked him to play the ball. Eric Sims to look for the line on the grandstand side. F1's raised the flag right on the New Zealand 25. Sims, oddly enough, the wind has changed a little bit in this first half. Here's Rhodes, Fred Jones rather, with the ball for Australia. Raper to Branson, and back inside well, but the New Zealand defence is excellent at this stage. We're still waiting for Roger Tate to take the field for New Zealand because Jim Bond is still off the field. Play just inside the New Zealand 25. Fred Jones, the dummy half, goes past Wittenberg to Rasmussen, running pretty hard. Last tackle coming up for Australia, 20 yards out from the New Zealand line. Shot at field goal by Eric Sims in the air. Watch the referee. And he said no. Went to the left-hand side of the posts. A 25 kick now for New Zealand. The score still New Zealand 2, Australia 0. Running with the ball this time, Colin O'Neill, the hooker, who beats a couple of, gets a beautiful pass to Clark. Clark is going hard. He's well put down just inside the Australian half. See what New Zealand can do. They're starting to show some fire in the forwards. A good strong run that time by Brian Lee, the second row forward, sent off last week against Great Britain. Out towards the backs for one of the very first occasions in this match. Can't do a thing with it, but eventually it does find the backs out to Schultz. Schultz looks for support. It goes over the head that time of Dunn. Picked up, though, by Bob Mincham. Mincham's going hard up towards the Australian 25. Gets his own pass away to Dunn. Dunn's going hard for the line, and he's in for New Zealand. Oh, a beautiful diving try that time. No, the referee has said he's come across this. He has awarded the try for one terrible moment. The New Zealand supporters thought that he may have ruled that he'd gone out over the touch-in-goal line, but it is a try, and going in for New Zealand, Spencer Nunn, number 15. New Zealand 5, Australia 0, after something like 8 minutes play in the first half. now for Ernie Wiggs with the ball, just walking back towards the Australian 25 to have a shot at goal to try and convert Spencer Dunn's try. A very good one too, and they left the Australian cover defence for dead. Lots of holes appearing around the scrum base for Australia, and Johnny Raper doing his usual sterling job in cover defending, but the inside backs seem to be missing a lot of tackles. First 2 points on the board for New Zealand came from a penalty goal by the left winger Ernie Wiggs, and here's Wiggs again, number 5, attempting to convert Spencer Dunn's try. He puts this one over. New Zealand lead Australia 7-0. Follow the flight of this one. It's in the air. It doesn't look too bad, but the wind caught it and blew it down. It dropped in front of the posts, didn't even reach the line, and the score remains at New Zealand 5, Australia 0 after 8 minutes play in the first half. Billy Smith ready to place the ball, and people watching this game from all sorts of incredible vantage points. The kick, in fact, taken by Langland's a grubber kick. Going back for at that time is Brian Lee, and running with the ball now up towards his own 25. Looks for a bit of support. Gets his pass away to Elwood, and Elwood kicking for the grandstand side to Rhodes. Rhodes has to let it go behind him, the Canterbury Bankstown winger, number 2. And he's clapping on the pace, up over the halfway line, no support, he must be dragged down. A good tackle that time by Colin O'Neill, who shows a tremendous amount of pace for a hooker. Wittenberg, who's lost it in front of him. New Zealand's regained, and New Zealand have possession just inside the Australian half. Clark getting his backs moving this time. New Zealand pinned down in their own half, and the kick wouldn't go astray because the Australian inside back seemed very, very slow to turn around. Last tackle coming up for New Zealand, almost certain to be a kick here. Goes across from Kevin Dixon out towards Schultz, who's looking for a bit of a gap, but he's well caught. Gets his pass away, loose on the ground. It comes across to Mincham. Mincham's caught, and Johnny King dumps him hard just inside the Australian half. That was the last tackle against New Zealand, and a scrum to pack down on that spot. Billy Smith with the ball for Australia on the far side of the scrum. They're about 5 yards inside the Australian half. A New Zealand ball as Clark goes back for it, but the ball did not get past the first 2 props. Smith tries again for Australia. It'll be an Australian ball, and the penalty goes once more against Fred Jones, the Australian hooker. Wrong foot out in the scrum, and an ideal opportunity once more for New Zealand to gain some ground with a penalty kick on the terrace side. There's the kick by Elwood. And it's raised the flag about 30 yards out from the Australian line. It's thrown infield here. See what they can do. A long, long pass that time that found Kevin Dixon coming through on the burst, but Australia has regained 30 yards out from their own line. That got them off, but the referee has ruled a knock on, and a scrum now to pack down centre field on the Australian 25. Billy Smith now comes in from right of screen to feed the scrum for Australia. A New Zealand ball. Clark got onto it. The referee once more blows his whistle. Smith tries again for Australia. An Australian ball. Raper breaks quickly from the scrum, but Smith was well caught that time, and coming quickly through was Tony Krilitich. Ron Coote, number 10. Makes a he's burst clear. He's up over the half into New Zealand's territory. He only had Raper with him, and he tripped over there. A loose ball going for at that time was Paul Schultz. Referee has come through. Let's see who does come out on top. Schultz wants it, and Coote wants it. Also Raper diving in there for it. And Schultz, in fact, had the ball, but the referee has called for the knock-on. Another scrum to pack down 10 yards inside the New Zealand half. Put in by Clark for New Zealand. An Australian ball goes to Raper, breaking quickly. Raper gets it away to Branson, who can't handle it. Knocked on, picked up well back that time by Spencer Dunn, who runs way around the other side of the scrum, steps inside Greaves, still going hard, looks towards his winger Wiggs, but he's well put down, 10 yards short of the halfway line. Here's Zealand showing all sorts of promise in the opening 15 minutes of this World Cup match at Lang Park, Brisbane. Goes across that time, across the backs with Tate on the field now. The New Zealand centre replacing Bond, number 1. He's playing Roger Tate in the number 1 jersey. Played away that time by Mincham, but the New Zealand handling falling down a little bit now. Bond is off the field for New Zealand, replaced by Roger Tate, number 1. This other scrum packing down now about 10 yards inside the New Zealand half. Clark to feed for New Zealand, number 7 on the far side of the scrum. Bounces straight out, the referee lets it go, goes across to Tate, who dummies, tries to step inside Branson. Smith puts him down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. New Zealand backs always look dangerous. Schultz having a bit of a run, but well taken there all the way. He'll play this one after a tackle by Dick Thornett, 10 yards short of the halfway line. Using their big forwards once more, and they're starting to back up well. Tate backed up by that pass. Goes across the back line and trying to get his pass away that time was done. Still a New Zealand ball, 10 yards inside their own half. Clark getting it across the backs once more, and at last comes the clearing kick over towards Rhodes' wing, and it beats him completely and raises the flag just inside the Australian half, about 3 yards in, and a scrum to pack down 10 yards in from that spot. Billy Smith, number 7 for Australia. It's an Australian ball, goes to Branson, but as you can see, it really bounced off the New Zealand prop's legs. Good clear tunnel this time. An Australian ball goes to Branson, out along the backs this time from Greaves, then to Sims coming up from the full-back position. Sims steps inside Elwood, and he finds, and unfortunately flying through there, Graham Langlands couldn't handle a knock-on by Australia, dived on by Roger Tate for New Zealand, 20 yards out from the Kiwi line. Marked by Raper as it speared away well. That was Colin O'Neill attempting to go 3, and Raper was the high tackler for Australia. New Zealand should really kick from this position, but they're hanging onto it far too often. The kick must come now with the last tackle coming up against New Zealand, and here it comes, but a little bit slowly. Rhodes covers this one on the Australian right wing, takes it inside his own half. He runs up towards Wiggs, steps inside and taken high and smashed down for his trouble on the New Zealand 25. A little bit of viciousness starting to creep into this match. Coote now has burst clear for Australia, but the referee has come through very, very quickly and ruled that the Australians were offside from that play the ball, and that was a long, long while after Coote made his burst, and the crowd understandably booing. The penalty to New Zealand just outside their own 25. Kicking for the grandstand side, and no risk about it. In fact, goes into the first 2 or 3 rows in the grandstand. New Zealand have the tap now, and to tap the ball, Colin O'Neill, the hooker. Clark gets it back to O'Neill. Going for it was Coote, eventually picked up by Dick Thornett for Australia. 10 yards inside the New Zealand half. He plays it to Fred Jones, number 12. Smith. Branson. Looks for support. Back there to Branson, who's knocked it on again. Now the referee has ruled that it did go behind him. Even from here, it looked like a knock-on. Australia still in possession. Rasmussen charging his way through. Well taken over the top by Gary Smith. He'll play it to Wittenberg. Past Raper to Sims. Sims looks for the line, the wise thing to do. The breeze might help him this time. Wiggs goes for it, picks it up 20 yards out from his own line. Rhodes comes to him, number 2, and also diving very, very low that time was Johnny Greaves. New Zealand have it right on their own 25. Wiggs playing it, and punches already flying as number 3 for Australia, Johnny Greaves, came in, and the referee now is calling out Wiggs, and he's penalising the New Zealand winger Wiggs for incorrectly playing the ball. The penalty awarded to Australia right on the New Zealand 25, about 1 pace inside. That's the 25-yard line. You can see Sims now almost certainly will have a shot at penalty goal with the score New Zealand 5, Australia 0. The sand bucket, which we never see on the Sydney Cricket Ground's hallowed turf. All right for Lang Park, but not for the Sydney Cricket Ground, as Eric Sims, the mercurial kicker from South Sydney, came up from their juniors and jumped from juniors straight into first grade. On that occasion, it was a first grade grand final. Eric Sims from South Sydney to try and put the first points on the board for Australia. Looks pretty good. No, it's gone to the far side of the post, taken by Roger Tate for New Zealand. Kicks himself a bit too far to follow on. Ron Coote's there to cover, picks it out of the air and just inside the New Zealand half. Looks for Raper, caught by one leg and couldn't get his pass away. He plays it to Eric Sims, number 1 for Australia. Raper, Smith. Raper doubles up, gets the pass, looks towards Rhodes, tries to go through himself, and well taken over the top that time, and beautifully, in fact, by Spencer Dunn. Smith to Sims, Branson, Coote can't handle, picked out of the air by Greaves. Greaves well put down, and Australia starting to crowd their backline movements. Smith from the dummy half has a bit of a run. He's made it up to within 30 yards of the New Zealand line. lost the ball in the tackle, knock-on called, and the scrum to pack down midfield and about 35 yards out from the New Zealand line, with New Zealand leading 5 points to 0. Put in by Clark, a New Zealand ball, goes to Tate, out across this time to number 15, Spencer Dunn, running pretty hard, gets it back to Tate. Tate tries to get his inside pass to Mincham. Mincham goes back for it, well dragged down by Johnny King, almost into touch, not quite. Clark getting his forwards moving, Kevin Dixon having a run up towards the halfway line, well put down by, or at least stopped rather, by Wittenberg. Lollipop passing now, Schultz can't handle, picked out of the air by Elwood, loses the ball, picked up by Langlands, and Langlands is regained for Australia on the halfway line. He'll play it to Smith. Rasmussen, Raper, Langlands looks towards Johnny King. It'll be the first time he'll handle the ball, but he's slipped down before he can get himself set for a sidestep. Plays it to Johnny King. Branson. Pass Coote, picked out of the air by Smith. Smith loses it, loose on the ground. Jones picks it up for Australia, and well tackled underneath that time by the New Zealand centre, Paul Schultz. Dick Thornett with a bad kick that goes into touch on the full. It's waved back, and the scrum now to pack down about 45 yards out from the Australian line. Waiting for Gary Clark to come around from left of screen and feed the scrum for New Zealand. Here he is now, puts it in, and the penalty immediately goes again, and that's for striking before the ball gets into the scrum against New Zealand. Good opportunity for Eric Sims to find some distance with a line kick. He'll probably look towards the grandstand side. That's the far side. Now the wind is tremendously strong. Oddly enough, in the first 10 minutes, the breeze was assisting Australia. Now it's swung right around. Here's Fred Jones, Australian hooker number 12. Branson dummies, gets it beautifully to Coote. Coote running very wide, number 10 bursts clear, gets it to Raper. Raper's up over the New Zealand 25, going hard for the line, looks for King. King couldn't quite get into position, and Raper was well put down that time by Gary Smith. Still an Australian ball, Wittenberg. Back here to Greaves, and a long one over there to Dick Thornett, goes to Jones. Rhodes for Australia, going hard for the line. Schultz is after him, dives, still going, and he's dived in the corner, but put his foot into touch. That was a close go for New Zealand as Rhodes dived but put his foot into touch about 2 yards short of the New Zealand line. Still New Zealand 5, Australia 0, but a very close shave for New Zealand. Put in by Clark for New Zealand. Looked like he'd run the blind side. The penalty goes immediately there to New Zealand. Once more, incorrect striking for the ball by Fred Jones for Australia, and once more, one of the New Zealand players down injured on the ground. They've already lost one, with their captain Jim Bond leaving the field, replaced by Roger Tate. Once more, one of the New Zealanders injured, and as soon as the player does get to his feet, we'll have a penalty kick to New Zealand from something like 10 yards outside their own line. And it looks as though another New Zealander is leaving the field. This is their second row forward, Brian Lee, who in fact was sent off last week in Auckland playing for New Zealand against Great Britain. He's now off the field, and it could be we'll see another New Zealand replacement. The next man on the field could be Ray Sinnell. There's the kick, and New Zealand now to have the tap just outside their own 25. Good solid barging forward play, going through pretty hard that time. Colin O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker, number 9. Clark, number 7, the New Zealand hooker, gets it away well. Loose on the ground, and diving on it to the last there was Kevin Dixon. Went behind him quite okay. Played away by Tate. Short kick ahead. It'll go towards Johnny Raper. Oh no, beautifully picked up in fact by New Zealand. They still have possession just inside their own half. Tate again with a short one. Well, it's gone too far. Goes straight to Johnny King just inside his own 25. Coming to him here is Mincham. Mincham beats him completely. Going off down the terrace sideline. He's pushed into touch. The flag is up right on the halfway line. A good saving run there by Johnny King. Last tackler coming at him was Colin O'Neill. Scrum to pack down right on the halfway line. Billy Smith now defeated for Australia. Very tight scrum, pushing off the mark. It's in there somewhere, an Australian ball. Smith has it, looks towards King, throws it back inside to Raper, who's knocked on, goes forward, eventually dived on there by Tony Kriletich, number 13 for New Zealand. Raper regains. Knock on called, another scrum to pack down, about 10 yards short of the halfway line in New Zealand territory. Clark now to feed for New Zealand. New Zealand ball. Looked as though he knocked it on. The referee would have missed that. Goes over to winger Mincham. Mincham caught over the top by Johnny King. On the halfway line, and New Zealand starting to throw it about, going through very hard this time. Gary Smith, but he's smashed down for his trouble over the top by Relton Rasmussen. Tate gets it away towards the backs this time, but the Australian defence now starting to move up far more quickly than they did in the opening few minutes. Last tackle coming up. Kick ahead this time. It's a long... Oh, the wind has caught it and stops it dead. Johnny King comes in from the wing. It'll beat him completely. Plucked out of the air by Ron Coote. Ron Coote's caught. Looks for inside support, and he's eventually held that time by Gary Smith. Going hard, Raper. Inside this time to Coote. Coote's almost clear. Gets an inside pass to Branson. Branson's put down on the halfway line. Plays it to Johnny Raper. Smith. Dummies, and Rasmussen juggling the ball is almost burst clear, and he has. Rasmussen's burst clear. He's got no support. He runs over towards Rhodes' wing, still going, standing up, and the tackle gets it back to Wittenberg. The referee, though, has ruled that he had knocked that ball down and should have played the ball, and in fact probably is saying that he called him for him to play the ball when he was caught. Another scrum to pack down just inside the New Zealand 25. Clark puts it in for New Zealand. The penalty once more goes against the New Zealand hooker Colin O'Neill. I'd like £1 for every time the hookers O'Neill for New Zealand and Jones for Australia have been penalised so far. The penalty to Australia, it could be the first 2 points for Australia, coming up with Eric Sims to have a shot at penalty goal from probably around the New Zealand 25, and the score at the moment, New Zealand 5, Australia 0. Eric Sims, he takes about 5 paces back. This is a fairly angled kick, but it's not beyond him. In the air, lots of height, lots of distance, and the flags are up. First 2 points for Australia, and Australia now put 2 points on the board to trail New Zealand 5 points to 2 after something like 25 minutes play in the first half. Roger Tate placing the ball on the halfway line for New Zealand. Elwood, in fact, takes the kick, a grubber kick, just barely went the 10 yards to Greaves. Greaves looks for a split down the middle and well taken from behind that time by Spencer Dunn. He'll play it to Branson, Jones, Smith, Rasmussen. A long one that Greaves can't handle, loose on the ground, picked up by Dick Thornett, number 9. Running across field, making no ground at all. Wittenberg, the dummy half. Raper, Smith. Goes on his own. He's got Coote there, and a long one. King going for it, but plucked out of the air by Mincham for New Zealand. Back inside beautifully that time to their centre, Spencer Dunn, and back inside as he tried to gain some ground and also some support. Played away beautifully that time by Henry Tatana. Across field to Schultz. Schultz dummies. A long lollipop pass to Wiggs. Wiggs is well put down underneath by Rhodes, and Raper also in there to cover, and boots are starting to fly. The referee will have to watch this one. The penalty, as you can see, goes against Australia, against Johnny Raper for kicking of that ball before the ball had touched the ground in the play of the ball. The penalty to New Zealand, and Wiggs almost certainly will have a shot at penalty goal from something like 40 yards, bit less than that, out from the Australian line, and about 15 yards in from touch. The score still New Zealand 5, Australia 2. This is Ernie Wiggs' third attempted goal. He's landed 1. Not a bad looking one, that one. And the flags are up, and New Zealand go further ahead. A second goal by Ernie Wiggs, a penalty goal that time. New Zealand now lead Australia 7 points to 2. The score, Australia 2, New Zealand 7, and the clock showing only about 5 or 6 minutes to go to half-time. Graham Langlands takes the kick-off, and it goes to winger Mincham. Mincham just inside his own 25. Not much sport up there. He tries to swing a pass away, gets rid of it as Dick Thornett comes through to cover, and the Australian cover defence starting to work a little bit harder now. Dick Thornett up there. Clark getting it away well this time, and coming through very, very hard was Tatana, the prop forward. New Zealand content to hang on to this one, and as well they should in this first half with a lead of 7 points to 2. It'd be silly to start any open moves in their own 25. Schultz attempting to carve a path down the middle, well taken over the top by Wittenberg. Last tackle against New Zealand, and a scrum now to pack down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. Billy Smith to feed for Australia, but Australia swinging this scrum a little bit. Smith puts in for Australia, an Australian ball. The referee saw that it did not get in, and if Smith keeps this up, he'll be penalised. He's aiming it for the second row all the time. Put in, and there goes the penalty to New Zealand. In fact, once more against Fred Jones, the Australian hooker, striking for the ball before the ball gets into the scrum. And this is very foolish. I'd hazard a guess at least 4 penalties, maybe 5, against Fred Jones in the first half. Kick for the line that time by New Zealand. Spencer Dunn has raised the flag just short of the halfway line, and New Zealand to have the tap there. See what they can do this time. They're running it out hard, but there's Wittenberg in with a crashing tackle, and look at the way the New Zealand, and here's the touch, the referee coming across to Dick Thornett. The penalty goes for pile driving Gary Clark into the ground unnecessarily. The penalty goes to New Zealand. They're not interested in a goal, they're going for the line. Sims underneath it, couldn't quite go. Oh, what a magnificent kick that one by Elwood. It's raised the flag about 5 yards short of the Australian line. The tap to come by New Zealand. Watch out for fireworks now. New Zealand right on the Australian line. Out across the back line, and number 1 Tate is caught in possession. Will play this one about 20 yards out. Number 11 going through hard, Kevin Dixon. Caught, coming in with a late tackle that time was Johnny Greaves. He's playing it to number 10, Gary Smith. A long, could be a shot at field goal. No, they're a little bit balked for room. Looks towards number 15 this time, Dunn. Dunn's caught. We'll get up and play this one with the last tackle coming up for New Zealand. Maybe a shot at field goal. We'll see in a moment. They're looking towards Mincham's wing. It goes back the other way that time to Krilitich. Krilitich gets it back the other way to Dixon. Dixon going hard for the line, and that was the last tackle against New Zealand. A scrum to pack down 20 yards out and right underneath the Australian posts. Scrum packing down, and Smith puts it in for Australia. Should be an Australian ball, but it's locked in there somewhere, and the penalty goes for getting down in the scrum against the New Zealand front row. Penalty to Australia, awarded 20 yards out. A wonderful opportunity now for Eric Sims to gain some distance with a line kick, and probably on the near side touchline. There's Sims' kick into the crowd. Raised the flag about 35 yards out, and Australia to have the tap there as King throws it infield to Fred Jones. Raper, Branson, Dick Thornett, number 9. Running hard, bumping off tackles and still going, and he's a bit of a marked man, eventually put down by Kevin Dixon. Smith from the dummy half with a nice pass across this time to Rasmussen to Coote, and Coote has burst clear for Australia. He's got Johnny King coming inside, going hard for the line, dived at beautifully though, and put down by Gary Smith, who was fortunate enough to be back there for New Zealand. Put into touch, the scrum to pack down now about 20 yards out from the New Zealand line. Tight old scrum, and the front rows having a lot of trouble getting down. Ball thrown to Gary Clark. Puts it in. It's a New Zealand ball, but once more did not get into the tunnel. Clark tries again. Bounces out the New Zealand side, and the referee will almost certainly award a penalty if this ball is not allowed to get into the tunnel next time. Clark tries again for New Zealand. A New Zealand ball. Smith dives on top of him, but it's New Zealand in possession. Played away that well that time by Lee out towards the backs. Getting to his feet and playing it though is second row forward Dixon. Played away by Tate. Trying to step inside and beat everybody. Back to Dixon, number 11. Looks for a bit of support and finds it there. And it's out towards the backs once more. They're looking towards their winger. And Mincham goes infield, number 2. Flying up towards the halfway line. Sims gets to him and puts him down. And then King comes in. And King eventually stops him. Short kick ahead. Sims racing for it. It might beat him. Sims is racing back for it. Takes it 20 yards out from his own line. Now runs back towards his own line. Now up towards the 25. Tries to go through Tate, and Tate gets him by one leg. Eric Sims will play it to Billy Smith. Raper. Caught. Coming in over the top, Tony Kriletich, the New Zealand lock forward. Now it's Smith again. Wittenberg. Well crashed down over the top. The tackler was Brian Lee. Long, high one by Rasmussen. Will it find the line? No. And coming up from the fullback position is Elwood. Elwood up over the halfway line, swings a pass to Wiggs. Wiggs comes to Rhodes, and Ray beats Rhodes, still going but stumbling. Put down, or at least stopped by Fred Jones just inside the Australian half. New Zealand looking very enterprising in this first half with half-time not too many minutes away. Australia has regained. Diving onto the ball that time was Johnny Greaves, playing it to Coote, number 10. Raper. Dummies, tries to go through on his own, swings it back to Greaves, a long one across to Dick Thornett, to Smith, number 7, to Rhodes. Rhodes comes to Wiggs, tries to run through a tackle and still going. He bounced through Wiggs, still going. Everybody after him. Tate comes from behind number 1 and eventually stopped him. And over the top, a good diving tackle by Tatana. Played away by Greaves. Comes to Wittenberg, number 13, up towards the New Zealand 25, dragged down from behind by Smith. Gary Smith for New Zealand. Played away. Eric Sims having a shot for field goal. The referee has said yes, 2 points for Australia. And Australia slowly but surely getting back into this battle. 2 more points. And the score now has gone along to New Zealand 7, Australia 4. There's the score on the board, and half-time only moments away. About 2 minutes to go to half-time. Roger Tate on the halfway line for New Zealand to kick off. Breeze is once more swung. It's blowing from the far side of the field straight towards our camera position as Tate kicks off. Not favouring either side. Goes past back to Rhodes. Rhodes will have to have a run this time. Runs it up towards the 25, waiting for the high tackle, and again they bundle into him and put him down. Good tackle over the top that time by Kevin Dixon. Played away by Wittenberg. Thornett now. Made about 2 or 3 yards. You'll play it to Raper. Raper with a long one to Smith. Smith dummies, looks for a bit of a gap down the centre, but they're waiting for him. Gets a forward pass away for sure that time. The referee let it go. Goes back to Raper. Back to Wittenberg, number 13. Looks towards Rhodes. Taken over the top by Henry Tatana and slammed down for his troubles. And this time the penalty goes against Tatana for roughing up Wittenberg when he was on the ground, and he's being spoken to now. The penalty to Australia. Eric Sims to look for the line on the grandstand side. Raised the flag over there beautifully. Made about 30 yards with that kick. It's thrown infield to Fred Jones. See what Australia can do. They badly need to get some backline movements going. Loose on the ground, but almost loose on the ground as it goes across to Branson. Branson's well caught over the top by Gary Smith. We'll play this one to Billy Smith just outside the New Zealand 25. Dick Thornett, number 9. Up to the 25. Hangs onto the ball, and as they were trying to steal it from him, the high tackle was by Tony Kriletich. Here's Billy Smith, number 7. Ron Coote standing wide. He's burst through 2 tackles, but eventually dragged down by Gary Clark, the New Zealand halfback. Playing it to Fred Jones, number 12. Billy Smith. Short kick ahead. Everybody going for it. It goes back to Schultz, number 4. Dived on. He won't quite get out of the tackle. A good covering piece of defence by Ron Coote. Running with the ball is Kevin Dixon. Gets his pass away well to the winger over here, Bob Mincham. Makes it about 3 or 4 yards, but underneath Wittenberg drags him down, and also in for the tackle was Graham Langlands. Oh, bad passing by New Zealand. Very dangerous right in their own line. A bit of shepherding going on too, but once more the referee has let it go, and the last tackle coming up for New Zealand about 6 yards out from their own line. They'll have to kick. Elwood's looking for a bit of room to move. He's got it now. Runs up. The half-time hoot has gone in the background. It's all over, the first half at least. And the score at half-time in this World Cup fixture at Lang Park, Brisbane, New Zealand 7 leads Australia 4. For New Zealand, a try by Spencer Dunn and 2 goals by winger Ernie Wiggs, and for Australia, trailing New Zealand at half-time 7 points to 4. Australia has made 1 change for the second half, and they badly need a couple of changes. Tony Branson has been replaced by Bob Fulton, the Manly Warringah player. He's playing in the number 14 jersey. Of course, in the second half, Australia and the All Dark are running from left to right. At half-time, New Zealand 7, Australia 4. Billy Smith on camera at the moment. There's Bob Fulton from Manly having his first international match. Kick-off by Australia. It goes way back here to fullback Elwood, attempting to run it out up towards the halfway line. Well put down. In fact, he didn't even make his own 25. Tate with a short kick ahead. It'll go across to Rhodes on the Australian right wing, takes it inside the New Zealand half, runs up to Wiggs. Wiggs goes low, and then coming in over the top with a crashing tackle was Henry Tatana. Played away by Raper. Smith to Bob Fulton at long last. Gets the ball. His first international game up towards the 25 and well dragged down. He's marked here by Brian Lee. Wittenberg puts his head down and barges. Gets into New Zealand 25-yard territory. He'll play it to Elton Rasmussen. A long one back to Eric Sims for a shot at field goal. The referee watches it very carefully, and it's there. Another 2 points for Australia, and Australia now only 1 point behind. New Zealand 7. Here's the hero, Eric Sims, after his magnificent field goal effort. 2 more points on the board for Australia. New Zealand 7, Australia 6. That was the second field goal by Eric Sims after only 1 minute, in fact not quite that of this second half. New Zealand 7, Australia 6. New Zealand to kick off. I'll have to watch Eric Sims. Roger Tate replacing Jim Bond. He took over from Jim Bond in the first few minutes, and a knock-on by Johnny Raper 20 yards out. The scrum now to pack down on that spot. Scrum ready now, and Billy Smith coming around for Australia to put it in, number 7. It's an Australian ball, but once more the ball did not get into the tunnel. That's okay. Goes back to Johnny Raper standing out of the scrum, dummies towards Rhodes, tries to go on his own. Well tackled over the top by Brian Lee. Played away by Jones. Smith back inside beautifully here to Thornett, charging his way through, but he won't go down on the tackle. We'll play this one to Wittenberg. Smith, then across to Rasmussen, standing very wide out with the backs. Australia inch by inch is starting to get down towards the halfway line. A kick ahead by Sims over the head of fullback Elwood. He's chasing it back towards his own line, picks it up right underneath the post 10 yards out. Hasn't got much support back there. He might even kicks ahead, races forward himself. He might get to it and gets it on the first bounce. He's got no support though. Elwood, the New Zealand fullback, kicks ahead once more over Sims' head into the Australian 25. The bounce beats Sims, and it almost picked up there, not quite. Still loose on the ground over the Australian line. Coote gets a boot to it, boots it out over the dead ball line, and a lucky save for Australia as the New Zealand players came storming through after that loose ball, and some brilliant play by the New Zealand fullback Doug Elwood. Line dropout now coming up for Australia after Ron Coote managed to save. And this will be interesting. If this doesn't go too far, I can see Roger Tate hovering around. If he gets hold of it, there could be a shot straight back at field goal. Eric Sims to take the line dropout. It goes past Tate. And wisely, he put it back a long, long way. Running through hard, Tate, he's dumbing. He wants to get up towards that 25 for a shot at field goal. Couldn't quite get there. Blows it across to Clark. And the referee apparently has ruled that a knock-on occurred just before the play of the ball. So we'll have a scrum pack down now just outside the Australian 25 centre field. Smith to feed the scrum for Australia. It's a New Zealand ball. Clark back the other way to Tate. Tate tries to step inside number 3 for Australia, Johnny Greaves. Couldn't make more than just a few yards. Brian Lee, the dummy half, spears it away to Clark. Back across beautifully this time to Dixon. Dixon gets his own pass away beautifully to Dunn. Dunn's going hard for the line, and everybody came at him at once. He didn't know what happened there. Gets to his feet and plays it. There's no dummy half at the moment. The referee has decided that further back, way back beyond the Australian 25, there was a shepherd, so the penalty goes to Australia. Sims looks for the line on the terrace side, has raised the flag just outside the Australian half, about 10 yards inside New Zealand territory. Rhodes throws it back inside to Fred Jones for Australia, the hooker. Smith to Fulton. Rasmussen running hard, bouncing his way through tackles, gets it to Greaves. Greaves looks for support, finds Fulton backing up. Fulton running the other side. Oh, then Sims, and then Smith comes up and backs up beautifully in centre field. Raper from the dummy half. Looks for support, finds it beautifully here in Coote, backing up magnificently, wide out, won't go down. We'll play this one to Fred Jones. Notice Raper very slow to get back to his feet. He's still down on the ground. Jones still going, well caught over the top. The tackler that time was Colin O'Neill. Playing it to Dick Thornett, right underneath the New Zealand post. Sims, another shot at field goal. It's loose and low, went to the left of the post, out over the dead ball line. Johnny Raper is back on his feet. No points for that one, of course, and the score remains at New Zealand 7, Australia 6. Apparently one of the New Zealand players has touched that ball after Sims kicked it, so it's a line dropout now for New Zealand. This could be interesting. The breeze now, if anything, is a little bit behind Australia, not much. Rubber kick, it'll go straight to Dick Thornett, number 9, but bounces behind him, picked up by Rhodes outside the New Zealand 25, claps on the pace, well dragged down, and dumped down for his troubles too by Bob Mincham. Raper past Fulton, who can't handle, picked up by Greaves. Greaves trying to run, Tate gets onto him, wrestles him down centre field on the New Zealand 25. Playing it to Rasmussen from the dummy half, across to Raper. Raper looks for support, can't get his pass away, and Rasmussen whizzes up to try and get onside and couldn't quite make it. Back to Sims, another shot at field goal, but before he can get himself organised, he's down. He throws a pass off the ground. So wonder there wasn't a penalty against that one. The referee has ruled that we'll have a scrum pack down just outside the New Zealand 25 centre field. Gary Clark puts in for New Zealand, and the penalty immediately goes to New Zealand once more against that poor old hooker from Manly, Fred Jones. Wrong foot out in the scrum and striking for the ball all the time, well before the ball gets into the tunnel. 25 penalty now for New Zealand. Nobody wants it at the moment. Holding the ball is Spencer Dunn, and he's thrown it across to winger Ernie Wiggs. And even a bit of sand to help him, just to mark the spot. Really, he's not interested in anything else except looking for the line. Now he's called for the sand bucket, would you believe, on his own 25. Obviously ridiculous to suggest he's having a shot for goal, but for some incredible reason, maybe a bit of time wasting, he's placed the ball, called for the sand bucket quite rightly, and he's going for the line on the terrace side. There's the kick. Well, I don't know, he could have done that without the sand bucket, could have easily done that with a punt or a drop kick. New Zealand tap on this spot, goes to Gary Clark, looks for support, finds it there. Tatana comes up, still on his feet, gets his pass away, loose on the ground, still a New Zealand ball, goes back to number 12, Brian Lee. Still on his feet, can't get his pass away. They're midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. He's playing it here to number 13, Kriletich, across to Tate. Short kick ahead, that might even go into touch on the full, and it has, and it's waved back. Have a scrum pack down now about 15 yards inside the Australian half and about 25 yards in from touch. Billy Smith with the ball for Australia. It's an Australian ball, once more did not get into the tunnel. Interesting to follow the form of number 14 for Australia, Bob Fulton, replacing Tony Branson in the second half. Put in by Smith, another Australian ball. Branson, at least to Fulton, runs with him, gets it to Fulton. Fulton's well taken, looks for support. He could have got a pass away there, but held onto it. He'll play it to Raper. Raper runs with it. He's got Coote and also Rhodes coming up, gets it to Coote. He's knocked it on. He's smashed down for his trouble with a high tackle. It's loose over the New Zealand line, but the knock-on's called for, and another scrum to pack down just outside the New Zealand 25. Gary Clark for New Zealand. It's a New Zealand ball, runs the blind side, no support over there. Coming in far too slowly was Ernie Wiggs. He'll play it to number 13, Tony Kriletich. And the Tate now number 1 for New Zealand, gets his good pass away across from Schultz, then beautifully across to Dunn. Dunn's flying, can't get his pass away, well put down by Johnny Greaves, number 3. playing it to his winger over there, Mincham. Will come back in field, and another kick wouldn't go astray for New Zealand. That's the sort of play they need at this stage, because all they have to do is keep driving Australia back. Here's the kick at long last. That one's a long floating one. Rhodes is underneath it. Rhodes waits for it to bounce. It'll go back to Eric Sims, who's mishandled it. Whether he knocked it on, we don't know. The referee has come across and called for the knock-on. Eric Sims has it. The knock-on called, and there's another scrum to pack down now, about 35 yards out from the Australian line. Billy Smith, left of screen, number 7, comes around to feed this scrum, and the breeze, I think, is starting to upset handling badly when the New Zealand players kick, and that's a tactic they should really adopt. Here's Fulton having another run. Tries to go inside number 12, Brian Lee, gets his pass away beautifully that time to Sims coming up from the fullback position. Played away by Rhodes. Raper goes through, taken very high for his troubles, and was well smashed down over the top by Brian Lee. Played away by Rasmussen to Smith to Fulton. Greaves looks for support. Burst clear. Looking for support now. Coote burst clear, and he's down towards the New Zealand 25. He might even go on his own. He's going hard for the line. They've got to him. He's over the New Zealand line. Here's the corner flag. The referee has ruled a try. Ron Coote's in. It's a try for Australia. Australia has hit the front. A magnificent run by Ron Coote from just inside his own half. Oh, quite magnificent. He left the New Zealand fullback, Doug Elwood, for dead. He couldn't quite get across to him. And Ron Coote, the pride of South Sydney, has run about 50 yards to score for Australia. Australia now goes ahead to lead New Zealand after that try by Coote by 9 points to 7. Here's Eric Sims. There's the score. New Zealand 7, Australia 9. Australia's in the lead now after that magnificent try, and we've had 11 minutes play in the second half, and Eric Sims to try and now convert Ron Coote's try from just outside the New Zealand 25 and almost on the touchline. Eric Sims, this will be a very difficult kick. The wind is blowing from right to left across the flight of this ball. We'll have to get tremendous power behind this. Lots of height, lost the distance. It's a good kick, but it's flagged away. It didn't miss by much, and the scores remain now at Australia 9, New Zealand 7. There's the score once more. Australia 9, New Zealand 7, and 12 minutes gone in the second half. Referee Percival on the halfway line now, waiting for New Zealand to kick off. And New Zealand at half-time led Australia 7 points to 4. And Australia has come back into this game with a vengeance. This is Gary Clark, number 7, placing the ball, the New Zealand halfback. But once more coming through was Tate. Long driving kick taken by Sims, about 15 yards out from his own line, up towards the 25. Beaten 2 of them. He's straight down the centre, beats Tate once more, bounces through a couple more, and he's still going. Gets his pass to Smith. Smith's off like a rocket here, but there's no support, and eventually gets his pass away to Fulton, who was dragged down. Raper gets it away to Smith. Thornett. It's Australia now, all over New Zealand. Greaves running wide. Looks for support, tries to swing it back in field, but nobody was in position. He'll play it to Dick Thornett, 35 yards out from the New Zealand line, with one of the New Zealanders down injured on the ground, Fulton. Back to Fulton, number 14. Can't find the gap and well put down. He'll play this one centre field. The New Zealand player back on his feet now. Wittenberg spears it back to Sims. Another shot at field goal. They're waiting for it. Gets it to Dick Thornett. Takes it very high. He'll have to get rid of it. He can't. He's burst clear once more. Looks for support. Gets it way back there to Jones, to Greaves, to Johnny Rhodes. Going hard for the line, but coming in hard. He gets it back to Greaves. Back beautifully here to Elton Rasmussen. Back to Johnny Greaves. Number 3 is burst clear. Up over the New Zealand 25. He's going hard for the line. Back inside to Fred Jones, and Fred Jones is in for Australia. Another try for Australia. It's a magnificent backing up by the Manly Warringah hooker, Fred Jones, who's gone across to score his first ever international try. And that was one of the most amazing bursts of backing up and magnificent handling in any international match you'll ever wish to see. Fred Jones has scored for Australia to put Australia further ahead. Australia now 12, New Zealand 7. Let's see how much time now we've had in the second half. With Australia 12, New Zealand 7, we've had about 14 minutes play in the second half, and Eric Sims to try and now convert Fred Jones' try. Eric Sims, he's already landed 1 goal and kicked 2 field goals. He's placed this one just outside the New Zealand 25. That's the 25-yard line. You can see a beautifully clear picture of his shot at goal. It's gone a bit to the left, I think. Let's watch the touch judges. The flags are up. 2 more points. Australia's gone further ahead. That's the second goal kicked by Eric Sims, and Australia now leads New Zealand 14 points to 7 in this second half after 15 minutes play in the second half. Now, one of the New Zealand players down on the ground, Colin O'Neill, he's the hooker, number 9, holding his left thigh. Maybe he's pulled a muscle there. Seems to be in a little bit of pain. The first aid man looking after him. But he's a pretty tough nut, this fellow, and as soon as he receives some treatment, he'll be back onto his feet. And New Zealand to kick off once more from the halfway line, with Australia leading in this World Cup fixture at Lang Park, Brisbane, by 14 points to 7. Colin O'Neill back on his feet, although he's limping a little bit, runs back to his position, and play now to recommence with New Zealand kicking off once more from the halfway line. They're trailing Australia now 14 points to 7, and they'll need a miracle to pull this game out of the fire. Roger Tate comes through, fairly short one, and it goes straight beautifully, in fact, to Elton Rasmussen, to Wittenberg, number 13, Dick Thornett, up over the halfway line, bouncing his way through tackles, well put down underneath by Tate. Playing it to Jones. Long wonders to Smith. Referee now has come through and ruled that New Zealand were offside. The penalty goes to Australia, awarded about 10 yards inside the New Zealand half centre field. Eric Sims has the ball. It's not too far out for a shot at goal, and Eric Sims has decided to have a shot for goal. This is a very long one. The breeze will seriously interrupt the flight of the ball. But Eric Sims is such an acknowledged expert at goal kicking that he can easily allow for the win. Let's see how he goes now, with Australia leading New Zealand 14 points to 7. Eric Sims having a shot for penalty goal 10 yards inside the New Zealand half. Sims eye on the ball. Lots of height, lots of distance. It sounds pretty good from the roar of the crowd. It's there. Another 2 points to Australia, and Australia leads New Zealand now 16 points to 7. Australia 16, New Zealand 7, and New Zealand are starting to fall to pieces after only 15 minutes play in the second half. Kick off by New Zealand. Long one that's beaten everybody and rolled into touch on the grandstand side, and a scrum now to pack down about 15 yards inside the Australian half. Billy Smith comes around from left of screen to feed the scrum for Australia. Good steady one. And it bounced straight out from the New Zealand side. The referee didn't blow his whistle, just called for it to be put in again. Looks to be a good clear tunnel, but New Zealand's front row is falling down. The penalty, though, has gone to New Zealand. And I thought for a moment referee Percival was ruling that one of the Australians had tried to handball that one back. Coming in from the wing is number 5, the left winger for New Zealand, Ernie Wiggs, who's kicked 2 goals. And he'll be trying for a penalty goal now on the mark of the scrum, about 15 yards inside the Australian half. 10 yards in from touch on the mark of the scrum, of course. A very good kick if he can land it, with Australia leading at the moment 16 points to 7. Here's Ernie Wiggs going for 2 points, which New Zealand desperately needs. In the air, lots of height, and it's flagged away. It's taken by Eric Sims over his own line for Australia, but he's boot to the ball. It'll go back all the way back here to centre Spencer Nunn, who knocked it behind him. Taken underneath by Greaves. Had Rhodes in there to cover, and he'll play it to number 5, Wiggs. Across to number 12, Brian Lee. Wrestling his way through, and he's a pretty hard fellow to put down. Eventually they do put him down. He'll play it to number 9, Colin O'Neill. Gary Clark. Number 11, Kevin Dixon. A long one across here to number 13 is Trilitich, the lock forward, well put down. New Zealand in two minds as to what to do now. Schultz kicks ahead. It'll go to the bouncers beaten everybody, picked up over there by number 2 Mincham, and Mincham has regained for New Zealand just inside the Australian 25, but the referee, however, has come across and ruled the knock-on. We'll have another scrum pack down 10 yards in from the touchline. Billy Smith again for Australia. It's an Australian ball. He runs the blind side towards Johnny King's wing. Gets it to King. King's off down the grandstand touchline. Number 16 comes at him there is Elwood. Gets him to and puts him down. Ball and all. Bundles him to touch. Another scrum to pack down now 10 yards in from that spot. That's about 8 yards inside the Australian half. Billy Smith once more for Australia. Just tosses the ball across to Gary Clark for New Zealand as the scrum swings sideways. Billy Smith gets it again to King. King comes infield and runs straight and hard though into number 12 Brian Lee. Wrestle down, plays it to Raper. Raper now with the ball. Good close-up study as it comes across to Fulton. Fulton's almost clear. Gets it beautifully to Langlands. Langlands has bounced down for his troubles by number 4 for New Zealand, Paul Schultz on the New Zealand 25. Wittenberg, number 13. Straight through, looks for support, throws a lollipop pass picked up by Sims, but he's knocked on. Referee has caught it very, very quickly, and another scrum to pack down now about 20 yards out from the New Zealand line, with Australia leading New Zealand 16 points to 7. Interesting view of the tunnel as we're waiting for the ball to be put in by Gary Clark for New Zealand on the far side of the scrum. It's a very interesting shot as it goes in. It's an Australian ball to Raper, to Fulton. Fulton's going hard for the line, but well dragged down by Paul Schultz, number 4. Plays it to Raper. Raper again tries towards the right-hand side to Smith. Smith back inside beautifully here to Jones. Jones to Rhodes. Rhodes is over the line for Australia. Another try for Australia. John Rhodes, the Canterbury Bankstown winger, is in. And again, like Fred Jones, he's a bit winded too. His first ever international try. Another 3 points to Australia, that time by right winger John Rhodes, down on the ground at the moment, injured. I think he may have fallen on the ball, but he looks as though he's reasonably okay, and Australia now goes ahead to lead New Zealand 19 points to 7 in this World Cup fixture at Lang Park, Brisbane. Australia 19, New Zealand 7. The last try for Australia by John Rhodes of Canterbury Bankstown Club, and here's Rhodes down on the ground, winded after scoring that try. He had to reach out and stretch for the line as he was heavily tackled by 2 players and just got in by about 6 or 7 inches. Rhodes quite okay now, walks back to his position on the Australian right wing, and Australia now has gone further ahead to lead 19 points to 7, and the attempted conversion to come by Eric Sims. Here's Eric Sims, foreground, number 1, the Australian fullback. He's already landed 2 goals and kicked 2 field goals. And this is a pretty sharply angled kick from just a whisker outside the New Zealand 25 and about 4 yards in from touch. In the air, it's not bad at all. And the flags are up again, and Australia's racing away with this World Cup match against New Zealand. Australia now 21, New Zealand 7. We've had 31 minutes play in the second half. Australia 21, New Zealand 7. There's the kickoff, which very close to the touchline, a very sharply angled kick. In the air, and the flags are up again. Australia's just screaming away with this game. 2 more points from the magic boot of Eric Sims, and Australia now leads New Zealand by a colossal margin, 26 points to 7. So colossal that New Zealand couldn't possibly even hope to get away with this game with only 18 minutes to go to full time. There's the kickoff. taken by Elwood, the fullback, taken by Dick Thornett, who's lost it, loose on the ground. Australia probably still has it, and Elton Rasmussen is the dummy half. Raper, Dick Thornett, wresting his way forward. Number 12 coming at him there is Brian Lee. All the way out to Smith, to Bob Fulton. Number 14 looks for a bit of a gap down the centre, bounces through two of them, still looks for support, and it took four of them to stop him. Played just inside the Australian half. Smith, a long one across to Raper, standing very wide out with the backs. An inside pass here to Langlands. Langlands up over the halfway line, going hard, looked for a bit of support, couldn't get his pass away. He'll play it here to, well, the referee in fact has called that was the last tackle against Australia. Scrum now to pack down 10 yards inside the New Zealand half. Gary Clark puts in for New Zealand, a New Zealand ball. He's got Elwood coming up, gets it to Elwood, number 16, taken by Coote, throws a pass along the ground, dived on, and Australia once more has regained. Fulton got onto it. Played away by Fred Jones, number 12, to Smith, number 7. Oh, beautiful inside pass to Langlands. Langlands steps through one tackle, beats a high one, still going. Number 13 coming at him there was Tony Krilitich. He looks up, he's a bit upset about that one. Plays it just outside the New Zealand 25. This is Raper going through. Looks for support once more. Dick Thornett. Beautiful inside pass to Fulton. Can't handle. Goes back for it. It was booted clear and nobody can handle it. Still loose on the ground. Picked up by number 15, Spencer Dunn for New Zealand. New Zealand have regained. Playing it away to number 17, Henry Tatana. Out across to number 11, Kevin Dixon. And then to winger number 5, Ernie Wiggs. Taken well by Rhodes. Playing it to number 11 again, Kevin Dixon. Tate, a floating, bouncing sort of a pass. Took ages to get there. Again to number 4, Schultz. Schultz up over the halfway line, an inside pass to number 15, Dunn. Dunn's going hard, but again the Australian cover defence much too good, and Fulton was the tackler. All Australia. Gary Clark, number 7, throws a lollipop pass back there. Kicked for the line that time by Colin O'Neill, which has raised the flag. Just a whisker inside the Australian 25 and a scrum to pack down 10 yards in. Smith to put it in for Australia, number 7. Did not get into the tunnel. He'll try again. And that time the penalty to Australia against the New Zealand hooker, Colin O'Neill. And probably it was a deliberate penalty, I'd say, at this stage. All they want to do is regain possession. They're not getting much from the scrums. It's been all Australia from the scrums in the latter stages of the first half and all of the second half. Kick for the line by Sims has raised the flag midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. This is Billy Smith, Australian halfback, number 7, to take the tap. Fulton, Smith. Beautifully to Langlands, who couldn't handle, and Smith couldn't handle. Loose on the ground, picked up by Fulton. The referee has now blown his whistle for the knock-on. Another scrum to pack down almost centre field, and again midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Billy Smith puts it in for Australia. It'll be New Zealand ball. Gary Clark runs very close to the scrum, gets it to Schultz. Schultz is caught, still going, taken over the top by Coote. He'll play this one just outside the Australian 25. Number 11 going hard is Kevin Dixon over towards the far side touchline. But the Australian cover defence now much too good. Australia now working like a machine as it goes to Schultz. In fact, the ball went in front of him and then he knocked it on. Knock-on is being called. One more scrum to pack down about 35 yards out from the Australian line. And one of the Australian players has slumped down on the ground injured. I think this is Johnny Raper. No, it's not. It's Fred Jones, the Australian hooker. There's Johnny Raper, number 8, standing nearest camera. Bob Fulton walking towards camera, number 14. Number 13 bending over Fred Jones is the Australian front row forward John Wittenberg. Number 10 is Ron Coote. And as soon as he gets back to his feet, another scrum to pack down 35 yards out from the Australian line. Scrum packing down now just outside the Australian 25, goes to Fulton, to Langlands, looks for a gap down the centre, tries to go through Tate. He has the ball out to Fulton. Fulton still on his feet on the halfway line after being tackled by Clark. Raper now, got Fulton with him, to Fulton. Fulton looks for a gap, but Props goes back the other way, and he's in a wall of defenders there. The ball picked up, though, by Kriletich for New Zealand. Is still an Australian ball as the bounce clear. Goes over to Rhodes. Rhodes chasing the loose ball. Eventually couldn't get to it. Throws it into touch on the full. Accidentally, of course. Another scrum to pack down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. Clark, as the entire Australian pack collapses and takes half of New Zealand with it. Clark to feed for New Zealand. The scrum very wild and woolly. A New Zealand ball. He runs the blind side. He looks towards Elwood. Still going. Gets it to Elwood. He swings it away to his winger here. Wiggs. Wiggs is going hard, but the cover the fence again. Absolutely immaculate. Rhodes helps stop him. Raper puts him down. He plays it to Clark. Across to number 13, Kriletich. Long pass to Tate, then across beautifully to number 11, Kevin Dixon, still going well, but once more the Australian cover defence has to be seen to be believed, and Wittenberg and also Langlands wants to get a bit of his own back in there swinging. Very silly at this stage of the game when Australia is so much in command. Number 15 flying through there is Spencer Dunn, and once more Langlands in over the top with a bone crusher. He should stop this. Goes past Tate. Tate goes back for it, number 1. Throws a long pass to Clark, number 7. Looks inside and finds coming through very, very hard, number 13, Tony Kriletich. Back it comes to Clark. Looks towards his winger, Ernie Wiggs. Wiggs has lost it. Picked up beautifully here by Greaves for Australia. He's off down the wing. Well covered all the way. Bundled into touch beautifully that time by Paul Schultz for New Zealand. Another scrum to pack down just outside the Australian 25. It's Australia 26, New Zealand 7 as this scrum packs down just outside the Australian 25. Billy Smith to feed for Australia. It's in the scrum. It's an Australian ball. Smith runs the blind side, gets it to Sims coming up from the fullback position. Well taken by Brian Lee. Raper to Smith. Looks for Fulton. Can't get his pass away. Their centre field, 35 yards out from their own line. Australia in possession. Raper with a long one here. Thornett standing wide and knocking it on Elton Rasmussen as he runs it up towards the halfway line. Another scrum to pack down virtually midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line, and pretty well centre field. Billy Smith, number 7. In there somewhere, a New Zealand ball. Clark has a bit of a misunderstanding, gets his pass to Schultz. Schultz well dragged down. They're still midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Comes to number 12 that time, Brian Lee, who kicks ahead. Sims goes across to cover. He's got Rhodes there to help him. It's over the Australian line. Sims picks it up. He'll have to kick here, I think, to get himself out of trouble. Dummies towards Rhodes, takes the dump, and he'll be wrestled down here by Ernie Wiggs, number 5 for New Zealand. Played away by Rhodes to Greaves. Greaves back inside towards Wiggs, and then coming in with the last tackle was number 17, Tatana. Smith tries to use his weight. There's not much of it, and barge his way through. Plays it to Wittenberg, number 13. Finds a gap down the centre. Where's the support? There's nobody with him. He's over the halfway line. Comes to Elwood. Gets his pass to Fulton. Fulton looks towards King. Draws a man, and Fulton gets his pass away to King. King will go in for Australia. King's over the line for Australia. 3 more points. Oh, beautiful backing up that time by Bob Fulton. The second try scored by Johnny King for Australia. Johnny Raper, perhaps Fulton on the head there, right of screen. Johnny King the scorer, though. His second try in this match, and Australia now has raced away with the attempted conversion to come and leads New Zealand 29 points to 7, and Sims to try for a conversion almost in line with the left upright. We've got about 9 minutes play left in this second half. Sims ready. He's had a marvellous day with the boot today. And almost a repeat of his effort last week, playing for Australia against Great Britain in the World Cup match in Sydney. The score as he comes in is Australia 25-9, New Zealand 7. And once more the flags are raised, and Australia now into the 30s, racing away with this game. It's so much Australia's match that it's almost a joke now. New Zealand has completely fallen apart. The score after King scored his try was Australia 29-7. Now it's Australia 31, New Zealand 7 after the conversion by Eric Sims. And about 7 minutes perhaps to go to full time. The ball placed by Tate, who takes the kick off, a fairly short one. And once more Australia's burst clear. This is Rasmussen going straight up the centre. Comes to the fullback that time, Elwood, who took him down high, and he'll play it to Wittenberg just outside the New Zealand 25 centre field. Thornett dummies and tries to go through, pushes off 2 tackles, still going, and eventually wrestled down. The first tackle attempt was by Krilitich. Played away by Jones to Smith. Coote. Oh, and then coming through very hard. Langland's looking for it and knocked over one of the New Zealand players as he did so, flying through there. That was their number 12 player, Brian Lee, second row forward. Penalty awarded to New Zealand. They're looking for the line on the grandstand side. That one has raised the flag just a pace or two inside the Australian half. Australia 31, New Zealand 7. New Zealand are still keeping up a sort of a pace to try and keep their socks up and try and put on some sort of a finish, but ridden into the ground that time was Gary Smith. They still have it though, and they're tossing it over here towards winger Wiggs. Wiggs is going hard for the line for New Zealand, comes to Sims. Sims takes him low, and he was taken from behind anyway by Rhodes. He'll play it to centre, Spencer Dunn, number 15. Outside him is number 13, Krilitich. Gets the ball now, swings it away well that time to Dixon. Dixon going hard, is swamped. Put down right in front of the Australian posts, about 15 yards out. Playing it to Gary Clark. To Schultz. Schultz dummies, tries to go through on his own, but he held onto the ball far too long, flips it clear. It's still a New Zealand ball, and coming back the other way beautifully this time is number 12, Brian Lee. Well held up, still a New Zealand ball, and they're only about 6 or 7 yards short of the Australian line. Still a New Zealand ball, going through very hard this time. Oh, back the other way to Schultz. Schultz has lost it, loose on the ground. It must have gone in front of him, and he's ruled this time the New Zealand backs were offside. In fact, it was a forward pass. One of the Australian players down injured on the ground at the moment. They'll have a penalty in just a few seconds. They're leading New Zealand 31 points to 7. It looks as though it could be Billy Smith. A bit hard to tell with him lying on the ground from this particular angle. The first aid man on the field. No, it's Bob Fulton, the Australian 5'8", apparently a little bit winded, and so as soon as he does get back into his feet, we'll have a penalty to Australia about 6 or 7 yards out from their own line, with Australia leading New Zealand 31 points to 7. Bob Fulton back on his feet now. Seems to be quite okay as Billy Smith came across to try and console him. Time running out for New Zealand as this, or in fact it has run out. They couldn't possibly pull off a win at this stage with Australia leading 31 points to 7, and the kick by Eric Sims has raised the flag about 28 yards out from the Australian line. Thrown into Fred Jones. Raper to Fulton, then back inside beautifully to Smith, and Smith is well dragged down by Kevin Dixon. It's so much Australia that it's almost a joke now, this match. New Zealand trying hard, but they're just not in the event. Going for an intercept that time, and it's still loose on the ground. Booted through that time by Colin O'Neill over the Australian line, but the referee, while all this was going on in New Zealand, looked as though they might score. Hadn't moved from the spot. He's way back on the Australian 25, calling for the knock-on. Colin O'Neill, who you may remember was injured earlier, has a bad limp left leg injury. Coming back to the scrum position, and the scrum to pack down just outside the Australian 25. Billy Smith for Australia, number 7, the halfback to feed. Puts it in. It's an Australian ball. Goes to Raper, breaking quickly, but the referee had ruled that this time the ball had been aimed for the second row, and I think probably he was right. The penalty awarded to New Zealand just outside the Australian 25. No use going for goal. They'll go for the line, try and finish in a blaze of glory and get 3 points from a try. And that kick by Doug Elwood has raised the flag only about 15 yards out. Watch out for action now. They could go in and score a try. Out beautifully here to Gary Clark, number 7, going hard for the line, back inside. They're still going hard that time beautifully, in fact, was to Tana, pulled down by Raper. He's playing it to Schultz. Schultz, number 4. Dummies, goes on his own. He's over the Australian line. Push back, though, perhaps. The referee right on the spot. The New Zealanders think they've got a try, and there's a try. Schultz has scored for New Zealand. Look at the smile there on Dick Thornett's face. Probably saying good on you, mate, because you've tried pretty hard. 3 points to New Zealand. The try scored by centre Paul Schultz, which changes the score just a little bit, certainly not enough to worry Australia. The attempted conversion to come by Ernie Wiggs. There's the score now, Australia 31, New Zealand 10, and the attempted conversion to come with 3 minutes to go to full time. This is Ernie Wiggs. Pretty simple kick right in front, should be 2 points. By gee, that's close, but the flags are up. It just grazed the right hand upright. That'll bring the score to a slightly more respectable figure, but the scores really don't indicate the trend of the game. It's now Australia 31, New Zealand 12, and really the scores should be about 312 to 12. Australia are just that much more superior. Kick-off by Australia, which is taken well back there that time by Neil, has kicked ahead. Still New Zealand in possession. Out to Gary Clark, number 7. Back to Tate, number 1, up over the halfway line. Gets his pass back to Schultz. Schultz has got a bit of a gap. King chasing him. Gets it beautifully here to centre Dunn. Dunn's lost it. Loose on the ground. Picked up over here by Ernie Wiggs. Wiggs comes infield. Gets it back to number 7, Clark. Clark's going hard for the line and put down in a bone crusher by Dick Thornett. New Zealand coming back into their own now, but I think Australia has probably just eased up a little bit. Long pass over here to Tate, then across to number 12, Brian Lee going hard. Court gets it back to Lee. Lee's again going hard for the line. He must go in, I think. Gets his pass away. Could be a knock-on over there. The referee has come over and he said knock-on, no try. A knock-on about 5 or 6 yards out from the Australian line, and the score remains at Australia 31, New Zealand 12. Full time about a minute and a half away at the very outside. Eric Sims from the Australian 25, a long one. Goes back to Elwood, number 16. Takes it just outside his own 25. Decides to run. He's up to the halfway line. He flips his pass to Tate, number 1, who's caught by the jumper by Smith. Put down centre field, halfway line. New Zealand slowing to a walk now for a bit of an inspired burst. Elwood goes for the line. It's gone into touch on the full wave back, and a scrum now to pack down centre field right on the halfway line. Gary Clark has it for New Zealand. It's a New Zealand ball, runs the blind side, coming in. Oh, nobody could handle that one. It was Dunn going for it, goes back with it. Will now get up and play the ball to Tony Krulitich, number 13, the New Zealand lock forward. Across to number 11, Kevin Dixon. Spears his own pass beautifully out here to fullback Elwood, who's kicked ahead, picked up by King. No, he's knocked it on, loose on the ground. The full-time hooter's gone in the background. Players still scrambling for the ball, but it's all over. And in this World Cup fixture at Lang Park, Brisbane, Australia has defeated New Zealand 31 points to 12, 2 World Cup wins in a row, and if there were any stars, it'd be very, very hard to pick them out for Australia. Ron Coote certainly starred as a second row forward. Wittenberg had a wonderfully solid game. John Rhodes on the wing had a good solid game. Eric Sims, with his magnificent goal kicking, did much to put up that score of 31 points to 12, in which so many of the Australians starred. Unfortunately, 5'8" Tony Branson had to be replaced in the second half by Bob Fulton, and Bob Fulton had an excellent game, set up one good try for Johnny King. So many stars in the Australian side, it's impossible to pick them out. And for New Zealand, many players tried very hard. I thought the centre Spencer Dunn had a reasonably good game. Krulitich, the lock forward, was fair to middling perhaps. And Roger Tate, who came on to replace Jim Bond, the 5'8" and captain, tried his heart out. The final score, Australia 31 has defeated New Zealand 12.